So some things, oh, nope, it's not going to let us open that. Never mind. Some things that we did in 2025, well, we did so much in 2025. It had its ups and downs, but we had a great year. We did remove 2 dams from Stevens Branch and Berry. We reconstructed the Fish and Wildlife Access Area at Baker Pond in Brookfield. We planted more than 5,000 trees, collected almost 500 water samples, really built up our volunteer program. And what else did we do? The Winooski Flood Resilience Collaborative, which I'll talk more about later. So we had a lot going on, and we expect to see more of that coming up. So that's about Friends of the Winooski in general. But we're here to talk about what is a watershed and why does it matter. As I mentioned a minute ago, it starts with understanding all of the land area that sheds rainfall to a water body. And we outline the boundaries of watersheds, or delineate them, by connecting the ridge lines, the high points, from where water will flow downslope to the receiving water body. And now, when I've done some public workshops, walking tours, that kind of thing, and I ask folks whether they know what a watershed is, about half of people feel pretty good about knowing what a watershed is. And the other half, not so sure. Which is not surprising because it doesn't come up that much. You don't mostly need to know, right? And I think, everybody's pretty busy. I have aging parents and adolescent children and a demanding job. And if I didn't need to know what a watershed was, that would be great. But I really do. So I understand, I expect there to be a pretty big range of understanding of watersheds and why anyone would care about it. Why would it be relevant to you? And so we're going to go on kind of a journey of some really specific ways to understand watersheds and how they're relevant. It's going to involve a lot of maps. And my apologies to people who don't think spatially like that, but it is a spatial concept, so hopefully it'll start making sense. So we had earlier kind of a cartoon version of the Winooski watershed. This is a more detailed version where you see some shading to give you a sense of the mountains and a sense of the rivers are all outlined there. And you can see in the inset, if I can, look at that. The yellow area there is the Winooski River watershed in the context of the Lake Champlain Basin, which is all of the watersheds of the major rivers that flow to Lake Champlain. So I just called this a basin, which is different from a watershed, or is it? It's pretty much the same thing. Typically, we say basin when we mean a larger area that's made up of multiple watersheds. Often people refer to the Winooski River basin because each of its major tributaries has its own watershed. It's kind of a nested concept, and each of the little rivers that flows to the tributary is going to have its own watershed. So it's a matter of scale. And you might also hear sub-watershed for if we're talking about the watershed that drains to the North Branch River is a sub-watershed of the Winooski River Basin or Winooski River watershed. People might also say drainage area or catchment, and those can be used for smaller spots, not necessarily a river or lake, but you can choose a point on the land and define what the drainage area is that comes to that point. So, some facts about the Winooski River watershed. You've seen it twice now. It's a little more than 1,000 square miles in area. The origin of the main stem of the Winooski River is Coit's Pond in Cabot, and that main stem flows from Cabot 88 miles to Lake Champlain. It has 7 major tributaries. It has a unique geologic history. The river precedes the rise of the Green Mountains as the glaciers receded. And so it's been a really important transportation corridor for millennia, enabling people to get from between Lake Champlain and the Connecticut River. That's why 89 goes through there, right? And that's why we have quite a few larger settlements along the Winooski River compared to other parts of Vermont, because it is this important corridor. So the watershed as a whole is mainly forested, like the rest of the state, but it's about twice as developed as the rest of Vermont overall. The state of Vermont overall is about 5%, 4.5%, 5% developed, which means buildings, parking lots, roads, and the Winooski watershed is about 8% developed. So it's quite a bit more complex, I would say, than average, which makes it pretty interesting for us. It's also one of the largest watersheds in Lake Champlain Basin. So I want to pause there for a moment and see if folks have any questions. And also, please raise your hand and ask questions if you do. Yes?
How do you define this watershed? Because I feel like you could look at the Winooski River and look at all the waters, the streams that come into the Winooski, and you could define so many more streams and rivers that come into the Winooski. How do you make that boundary for this watershed? Does that make sense?
For the North Branch watershed?
For the Winooski.
For the Winooski.
Yeah, like the whole. How do you?
Yes, just as I.
Sorry.
I don't have like many different ways of explaining it, but you follow the contours. Are you familiar with contour map? Contour lines on a map. So if you follow the contours on a map, you can see, and you can see in the model out there decently that, yeah, you go around to the highest points and everything from those points is going to go down this way into the Winooski. And on the other side of the divide, to the east of us, we'll go to the Waits River, to the south of us to the White River, and to the north to the Lamoille. And we'll look at that in a couple different ways. Hopefully it will become more clear as we look at 17 different maps. I'm going to try to do this if it will let me. Yes. Okay. So Lake Champlain Basin Program, which Sean mentioned earlier as a funder of this series. Oh, it is not showing up there.
Want me to put it up there?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, pop quiz. What are the 7 tributaries?
Huntington Planet.
Actually, I don't think he cares to
That shouldn't happen. Sorry, I'm gonna break it. That was sure. No, it's clear.
Okay, I was a little over-ambitious in terms of being able to switch from the PowerPoint to the internet back and forth. Not going to do that. But I was ready for that with some screenshots here. So, what it would have showed you on the Lake Champlain Basin Program Atlas is this is the outline of the Lake Champlain Basin. You see the Winooski here. And you can follow the Winooski River from where we are here in Montpelier to the lake, up to Canada. It goes into the Richelieu River, up to Sorel-Tracy, and then into the St. Lawrence River, and up, 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 until, oh, that's all right, until it got out in the ocean. So, for some bigger context, that is where, when it rains in Cabot, it eventually makes its way to the ocean. So the Lake Champlain Basin Program Atlas is one neat tool that you can use to explore the Lake Champlain Basin. The Stroud Center in Pennsylvania has created something called Model My Watershed, which you can use to look at watersheds anywhere in the world. And what I use it for is to look at the Mississippi watershed, which you can see starts in western Pennsylvania. It includes both Pittsburgh and Denver. That's wide. It goes all the way up into Alberta up there. That's the fourth largest watershed in the world. It's quite large. But one reason that I'm showing you this is to talk about elevation. So elevation really defines a watershed, right? And gives it kind of its nature in some ways. So from Minneapolis to Baton Rouge down here, I couldn't do New Orleans for some reason. The model's a little finicky. But Minneapolis is at about 830 feet in elevation. Baton Rouge is at about 60 feet above sea level. So that's a drop in elevation, keep this in your mind, of 770 feet over 1,200 miles from Minneapolis to Baton Rouge, 1,200 miles. The elevation decreases by 770 feet. So Cabot is at 1,330 feet up there at Coy's Pond. Montpelier is about 600. These are all very rough numbers, just I Googled them, so. This is not scientific, it's just to give you an idea. So the drop in elevation between Cabot and Montpelier is 730 feet. Pretty similar to Minneapolis to Baton Rouge, but it's only 20 miles. So think about that in terms of velocity and the water traveling through our watershed. It is booking. So I also used Stroud's Model My Watershed to model the area above Montpelier. So after the 2023 floods in Montpelier, I heard so many people say over and over, if only we had a map that we could see where the water comes from. Where is it all coming from? And boy, do we have maps. So this is a question that we can answer, right? This is where the water is coming from. And you can see it comes from Worcester down the North Branch. It comes from Calais down the Kingsbury Branch through East Montpelier. It comes from Cabot, Marshfield, Plainfield. This is what we call the headwaters of the watershed. It comes from Orange and through Barry on the Jail Branch there, and through Williamstown, the Stevens Branch to Montpelier. So I've just described 3 of the sub-watersheds of the Winooski watershed. 4. The North Branch, the Kingsbury, the headwaters, and the Stevens and Jail are one. So Ned Swanberg, who lives in Montpelier and works at DEC, did some calculations that he shared with us and showed the proportions of each contributing watershed to Montpelier. You can see the headwaters, Cabot, Marshfield, Plainfield, contributing about 67%. The Stevens branch, 29%, and the North branch, 4%. That is in part thanks to the Wrightsville Dam, which stores a tremendous amount of water. So the water that came into town largely came from the east. So another mapping tool that we use daily at Friends of the Winooski, but we will not demonstrate right now, is the Agency of Natural Resources Atlas, which has just a ton of information on it. You need to have a little bit of experience fiddling with maps to use it easily, but it is publicly available. Anyone can mess around with it. And so what I did, thinking about, okay, so we just saw, I'll go back a sec. This map, this is all the water that's coming from upstream of the city into the city. This area, by the way, is about 250,000 acres. It's 400 square miles. That is coming from Montpelier. But what about the rain that falls? Yes?
I think we have a question.
Oh, Carol?
Yeah. Did he also look at what the surface area is for each of those? The surface area for the headwaters, surface water for... Okay.
Yes. But I don't have that in front of me. So what about the rain that falls right on Montpelier? What happens? Where does it go from one area to another? So one thing that I did using the Agency of Natural Resources Atlas is delineated the watershed for the Frog Pond in Hubbard Park. This dot right here is the Frog Pond. This is its watershed.
Wow.
You can ask the atlas to delineate a watershed for any point on the map. This is about 50 acres. So the land area that drains water into the Frog Pond is about 50 acres. It's not super precise, once again. It depends kind of on exactly where you drop that point, etc. So, once the rain falls on this 50-acre drainage area, then what? Does anybody know? Any theories, guesses?
Frog Pond Central Flood.
Frog Pond Central Flood. The Frog Pond did flood in 2023. The Markowitz's backyard had a river flowing through it. But that was unusual, because anybody know where the Frog Pond goes? If you look closely, it has a pipe sticking up from it, which is an overflow outlet. Because like nearly every other thing that looks like a pond in Vermont is not a natural water body, it's constructed. And the water goes out of the Frog Pond and into the stormwater system. So you can see the stormwater system is mapped here, and it goes right down Winter Street, all the way down Winter Street, and it outlets into the North Branch right here. So I share this because the stormwater system kind of messes with our ability to understand how watersheds work within the city. A lot of our neighborhoods are built on what used to be wetlands and streams. and are now drained through this underground system. One of the walks that we did in the fall that Sean mentioned over in the Deerfield Drive area, there's a stream over there that sometimes it's a stream, sometimes it disappears. Sometimes another stream appears over here. Is it the same stream if it's running through the stormwater system in between? It's kind of a whole other topic, but I just want to point out that understanding the underground drainage is part of how water works in Montpelier, and it can confound a little bit our ability to see it as a watershed in developed areas. Okay. So we're going to zoom back out now and look at yet another different map, because it's impossible to get all the information that I want on the same map. But eventually I found it. So this is a piece of a big poster of the Lake Champlain Basin that you can find from the Basin Program. And you can see the Winooski is pink on this map. The Lamoille is here in purple. The Missisquoi is up here. Otter Creek and Lewis Creek down here. These blue bits are really interesting. These are what's called direct to lake. So that's where the water from this area goes directly into the lake without joining one of these major tributaries first. And what this map shows really well, really clearly, is the overlap of the watershed boundary with the municipal and county boundaries. And one reason that this is so interesting to me is that our weather warnings are done by county. So you'll see this is the boundary between Washington County and Orange County. And last summer, there was a warning of a big rainfall event forecast for Orange County, but not for Washington County. And I worried about this particular weather warning quite a lot, because I don't know whether people realize that, for instance, the Great Brook in Plainfield originates in Orange County. The Jail Branch originates in Orange County. The Stevens Branch originates in Orange County. So if there's heavy rain in Orange County, if it's right here, and you never know exactly where it's going to be, if it's right along this ridge line, then you might get your rivers rising in Washington County, even though you only got the weather warning in Orange County. So this is one reason that where your watershed is quite relevant, right? This map, I've zoomed in here on some of this direct lake area. This map also nicely shows really clearly the distinctions between the different watersheds leading to Lake Champlain. And Friends of the Winooski gets a lot of calls for help with situations on, say, Mallett's Bay. Is Mallett's Bay in the Winooski watershed? No. Or from Jericho, because the Browns River is here, but you know what? It turns up north and goes up to the Lamoille. But Jericho's tricky because half of Jericho is in the Winooski watershed. So if you live closer to Millbrook, that's the Winooski. So this is another reason that towns, thinking about rivers in terms of towns, is a little tricky, because sometimes half your town goes to is in one watershed and half your town is in a different watershed. Luckily, all of the watershed groups and conservation districts and regional planning commissions in the state, we all know each other, we all work together all the time, and so we can help connect people with the right place. There's also a super confusing situation. I don't know if I can find it right now, but in Huntington, it might be this one, there's a hollow brook in Huntington. There's also a hollow brook right over here that's a different hollow brook. They originate like right close to the watershed divide. One runs to Huntington, the other runs to the Lower Platte. It causes a lot of confusion. So, speaking of community partners, other watershed groups, conservation districts, etc., I want to talk a little bit about the Winooski Flood Resilience Collaborative, a new initiative that came along after the 23 flood. One of the three key goals of the Montpelier Commission on Recovery and Resilience was to lead a regional conversation about how to work together on flood recovery and resilience. And so they pulled together a committee of local, regional, and state organizations, including Friends of the Winooski. And we twice now have convened all of the municipal leaders from all of the towns in the watershed to come together to exchange their experiences with flood recovery, what they're working on, what challenges they're running into, what opportunities they know about, and talk to each other about it. Just last month, the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission was awarded a Community Development Block Grant for Disaster Recovery, CDBGDR, which is United States Housing and Urban Development funding that comes through the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development, because this work is really important to economic development in our state and to communities. So the state has prioritized our working together to continue this collaborative and to lead this process. So why is the state prioritizing an initiative to look at flooding from a watershed scale perspective? Sometimes there are cross-boundary impacts from the flood mitigation projects that we identify. So one project that Friends of the Winooski is working on right now is looking at removing the old Batchelder Dam right in downtown Plainfield. That is right here by the Main Street Bridge. This is the Plainfield-Marshfield town line. The impoundment of this dam goes all the way up here past John Fowler Road up into Martin Bridge Park. So taking out that dam is going to change how the stream works and change the lower the flood elevation all the way through here. There's an issue with flooding right along this section of Route 2. It often gets reduced to just one lane, and we're seeing some erosion starting on that embankment of Route 2. So this is a project that we're working on in Plainfield, but it's really going to have an impact in Marshfield as well. Another project is the Pioneer Street Dam in Montpelier, which is not our project. Vermont River Conservancy and the City of Montpelier have been working on that one. And the removal of the Pioneer Street Dam together with the floodplain reconnection at 5 Home Farm Way is going to reduce flood elevations in this yellow outlined area here and this yellow outlined area here, and anywhere that's kind of, the paler it is, the less inundation will remain after the project is finished. So this is Berlin over here. So this is a project of interest to both Montpelier and Berlin, and something that they need to be talking about together. And so of course, these are two neat examples of flood mitigation projects with cross-town benefits. Not every project is like that. There are plenty of projects that will only have benefits in their immediate area, but there's still a lot that communities can learn from each other about the kinds of work that's being done and support each other in trying to develop greater flood resilience. So, why the watershed matters? Yes.
Well, quick question, we were talking about the old Dutch Elder Dam in Plainfield, and you said it would really impact Marshfield.
Yes.
Is that in a positive way or a negative way?
Positive. We really try not to have our projects have negative impact. I would not like that. Yes.
A follow-up question, what happens to that water that was impounded? Does that create a problem downstream?
No. So it's less a matter, so here's a thing about dams. I was not asked to talk about dams, but I really like to, so. Thank you. A lot of people think of dams as holding back water, right? It's kind of an obvious thing in your mind that the dam is there to hold back the water. But in fact, what dams really do is hold the water up. They, it's kind of the point of the dam, particularly if the dam was built to generate electricity, the more the water falls, the more power it can generate, right? So you want the water to be up high for that. And then once the dam is built, it very quickly, within a matter of a few years, and Old Dutch Elder Dam has been there for more than a few years, it fills up with sediment behind it. So it's not only is it not holding water behind it, it's really full of sediment. So when I show you this area up here, I think it's more than a mile, is, so we just did a tree planting project right here last summer, along with Vermont Land Trust removed a berm along the river here to allow more, better connection to the floodplain. And I was wading in that river, and the stream bed up there is like a desert. It is just pure sand there. There's no good biotic diversity. And it is just the impounded sediment from that dam all the way back up there. So part of this project would be to remove a lot of that impounded sediment, and then the whole system lowers. So the stream bed is lower, the water level is lower, and it's the same volume of water moving downstream. It's just at a lower elevation. So then with the dam holding the water up, that means that when there's a high water event and the river floods, it's flooding at a higher elevation, right? You take the dam away, lower the water, and the flood will be occurring at a lower elevation.
Will you have to remove the sediment, or will you allow the water velocity to remove it naturally?
We will likely be required to remove most of the sediment because of the phosphorus and the potential impacts from that volume of sediment moving downstream. So we removed 2 dams in Barry this summer from the Stevens Branch, and we, in both cases, removed most of the sediment that was behind them.
Which is a contaminated fill, right?
Hopefully not contaminated. Hopefully it's similar to the background levels of the soil in the area. If it is found to be contaminated, then it has to be disposed of at a landfill like Coventry where they can accept that. And that would astronomically drive up the cost, because a lot of the cost of dam removal is the trucking of the sediment to a disposal site. We've been fortunate that Vermont is full of spent quarries, convenient holes in the ground, not connected to rivers where we can deposit that sediment. You have a question? You had a question?
This may not be the direction you want to go,
It's okay.
but I know change is really hard
Yes.
for people. And I'm just wondering if there are thoughtful arguments against doing this that you consider, that people bring to the table. Like what are sort of the top one or two positions people have who are thoughtful about rivers that people push back against doing it?
Well, sure. It depends. So each dam is really unique, right? It has a unique setting, a unique history, a unique relationship to its community. And so there are a lot of questions and concerns to work through when we're contemplating a project like this. I will say that the dam that we removed behind Trow and Holden Tool Company in Barry this summer, that tool company has been in operation for over 100 years, owned and run by the same family. And they felt that that dam was part of their family history. But they trusted us to do the engineering work to explore what would be the benefits of removing it, what it would look like after it was removed. And we just kept in communication, and they ended up deciding that if they're going to stay in that location, they really need the river to be more predictable and sustain their business. And so then they moved ahead with it. But a lot of that dam is privately owned. It's up to the owner whether they want to remove it or not. So it's really different in every circumstance. The East Calais Dam, as you know, we're working on a design to remove the dam in East Calais, the one that's right next to Route 14, near the general store there. And of course, that pond behind the dam is kind of an aesthetic asset to the community, and folks are attached to that too. But it is privately owned, and the owners really want it to be removed. They would love to keep it, but in order to keep it, it would have to be rebuilt to modern standards, which would cost an astronomical amount. So there are a lot of factors to consider, and we do have to work our way through all of them.
How does removing dams affect the speed of the water
So the speed of the water downstream of the dam will not change from before the removal to after the removal. And the engineers have modeled this, and they have an animated model. It's super cool. You can see the water moving through it and the speed that it's going. So the downstream velocity doesn't change. The velocity upstream of the river is now a little bit slowed down by the dam, the sediment, the whole impoundment situation. So upstream of the dam, just in this area right here, you'll see a little bit higher velocity. And that's an important thing in the context of this project. There are houses and businesses with their foundations sitting right on the riverbank. And so if we dig out that sediment, and then the river's moving a little bit faster, is it going to scour out under those foundations? So we have to get all that figured out as part of this project and make sure that the foundations are all sound, and we're not going to, as I said, we don't want negative outcomes. So we have to make sure that we do that all carefully. Charlie?
If you've never been to the Plainfield Village and seen the Batchelder Dam, you ought to go before it's taken out. It's a spectacular dam. It's really beautiful. Made out of cut granite, and it's so masterfully put together.
Huge granite
There's a
blocks.
swim hole below and a swim hole above, and there's lots of good reasons to remove it.
Yes. It's leaking through the face, which is never a good sign. And it is always better to remove them intentionally with a plan rather than have them fail in an emergency way. We've had in the 23 flood at least 5 dams, including the East Calais Dam, were damaged or failed. And that, in this instance, that would mean all of that sediment rushing downstream, causing a lot of issues downstream, and the undermining of those foundations that I just mentioned would happen in an emergency way rather than a planned and engineered way. So, yes, sir.
Could you go 2 maps back?
2 maps back. You'll remember this one?
One more.
This one.
I'll keep going.
It's a lot of maps.
In the earliest days of the Lake Champlain Basin Commission, there was a data sharing agreement formulated between Vermont and New York and Quebec. And it resulted in the first maps of the basin. And everyone was astounded to realize that 75% of this state drains into Lake Champlain.
Yeah.
So the towns that don't think they're anywhere near Lake Champlain understand that they have an oar in this thing.
Right.
And that's, beyond the scope of this presentation, but it was really important, at least in the legislature, in helping with some understanding, and we now have a Lake Champlain fund, and that's contributed to by the thrown out beer cans all over the state.
Right.
And this ability to share data and visualize these things really makes a difference. And this is important to people beyond the immediate Washington County Winooski thing.
Yes, thank you. It is true that folks throughout the headwaters of the watershed, the rain falls in their yard, eventually makes its way to Lake Champlain. So we are all contributing to the water quality in Lake Champlain. And yes, Carol.
There's the presence of phosphorus in the sediment. Does that make it so you have to remove it?
Yes, because we don't want it to get to the lake. Yeah.
So that,
Can
that just go to quarry?
Yes.
It doesn't have to go to the
And this is where so everyone who does dam removal work in the state works together through what we call the Vermont Dam Task Force. And that task force is kind of in conversation right now with DEC about maybe removing less sediment because the phosphorus in the river is already accounted for. Do we really have to take that much out because it really drives the cost of the project? And so we are trying to find a good balance between how much sediment needs to be removed and how much could be left in.
And the gentleman over there mentioned the contamination behind the dam. Was that the phosphorus, or are we thinking of something else?
We have removed 3 dams and none of them has had contaminated sediment. We test the sediment, we have to take cores of the sediment and send it to a lab to test for mainly like metals and PCBs and that kind of thing. And if it has a higher level of that kind of pollutant, then it has to be handled more carefully.
Are there various plants that are particularly great at absorbing phosphorus?
Oh gosh. Outside of the scope of okay. All plants will uptake phosphorus. I don't know whether some of them are better than others. That's not my question.
Yes.
Sean?
Just noticing this observation, like the complexity of managing these dynamic systems of rivers. We have 2 major ways in which we have altered the river. One is making dams, the other is dredging the river. One brings the stream channel up high by backing up projects. And yet the solution is to kind of do the opposite where you can. So here's an example of like a dam removal to bring the stream channel back down.
Right.
Whereas, if you're in Montpelier, we're trying to figure out how to deal with the fact that the channel has become so low that it's disconnected already from the floodplains.
Right, yeah, we're always trying to balance these things and to help rivers look for opportunities where we can help rivers get closer to a natural kind of equilibrium. And this, if you're able to come to Shane Jakewith's talk next week, he'll talk a lot about that, and I think it will be very interesting. But yes, it's a lot of site-specific, context-specific, whether you want your stream bed to come up or not.
You mentioned that once the water is in the river, it's too late. It's too late to affect how the water got to the river.
Or the condition, yeah, certainly too late to affect
So I was just wondering, I mean, it's sort of locked back to the whole plants thing, maybe this is just
Yeah.
from you. But I spend a lot of time looking at how soils absorb water and store water. And I just noticed the last, all this time we've had, the last couple of years with all these floods, that I really don't hear anybody ever talking about why is the water shearing off the landscape so readily? And shouldn't we be spending more time trying to get that water to slow down and sink?
Yes.
This is what
You should.
Last week was about the way forests can do that.
Yeah.
But there's surely ways that farmlands and other, yeah.
Absolutely. So that is why I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that we, Friends of the Winooski, planted over 5,000 native trees and shrubs this year, both along rivers and in some adjacent meadow areas, because you're absolutely right. If you have a big lawn area, and particularly if the lawn goes straight up to the edge of the river, water goes really fast across the lawn, like water off the duck's back, right? The grass just lies down flat and the water just shoots right across it. But if you plant a bunch of trees and shrubs in the area along the river, 50 feet back from the top of the bank, 100 feet back from the top of the bank, or even if you're not near the river, if you have a big backyard, a lot of time in Vermont, going way back here, there was what we called the 10-acre loophole, which I believe has been closed, but we have a ton of 10-acre lots in Vermont because of this septic permission loophole. And if you buy a house in Vermont, maybe the last person was mowing 6 or 8 acres because that's what they did. And so you continue to mow those 6 or 8 acres because it seems like that's what you should do. But you don't have to. You could mow less, mow a smaller area, and let trees and shrubs grow up, or plant trees and shrubs, because what they do is create what we call roughness, so that the water, has a lot of little obstacles it encounters on its path. Another walk that we did with the Nature Center this fall was looking at a riparian buffer area in Northfield along the Dog River, and that when that area floods in the 23-24 series of floods that we had, the leaves and sticks that pile up against the side of those shrubs along the river are amazing. And that's, leaves and sticks, it doesn't sound like much, right? But it's not going down the river, clogging infrastructure, scouring stream banks, carrying nutrients up to the lake to feed algae blooms, etc. So, yes, less lawn, more trees. other housing development around wetlands, yeah.
By 50%.
Yeah. I'm staying right out of that. At the same time, the state passed the Flood Safety Act in 2024, which does give jurisdiction of river corridors to the state, which is a big improvement because it's been town by town kind of patchwork as to what the zoning rules say. And whenever it actually gets set up and running in 27, 28, it will mean that there won't be any more tree cutting in any river corridor, which is wonderful.
Sorry. So again, I spent quite a bit of time looking at how water moves through the landscape. And you've been talking about the riparian zone and all that stuff. One of the things that I have learned is the higher up you can capture the water and slow the water, the better it is for everything. So it even feels like the riparian zone is already a tad late.
Right. It's the last stand.
Right. So, you know, there's like people in the higher elevations feel or are sort of think, oh, well, I don't have to worry about floods because I'm way up here.
Right.
But their property management, land management, that have a huge impact.
Yes, they're in the best position to help.
So you know, there's getting further and further up in elevation to where there's lots of things that can be done.
Yep. Yes.
Kind of just piggybacking off of that, I think I remember attending 2 different workshops with Friends of the Winooski about a year ago about green stormwater infrastructure, and I know DC has this amazing manual for stormwater infrastructure for homeowners and businesses that helps you understand what you can do at your property to help slow it, sink it, and store it, and do things like building a rain garden or building a rain barrel, and all of these incremental steps that we can take as a collective can help so that when we do get down to the riparian buffer area and to the rivers, that we've all done a little bit to help kind of catch what we can.
Yes, yes. And Taylor, do I stand up, Taylor? This is Taylor Lewin, so you have your 2/3 of our staff. Taylor has a bunch of stuff at the table in the hall to check out on your way out, including that stormwater manual, maybe some rain garden manuals, I'm not sure. Yeah. That's the idea. If you are managing a piece of land anywhere in that 1,000 square mile area, you have the opportunity to maybe slow the water down a little bit.
Michelle, thanks so much.
Thank you, Sean. Parking lots. What about them? Reduce them. How about? Like in Montpelier, where we have a lot of parking lots right along the river.
Yeah.
What's that?
Can we still park and reduce the flow?
Well, if we build a parking garage.
What about parking lots with surfaces that allow water to go in?
So there is permeable paving. The permeable paving takes maintenance, because it's porous. It fills in pretty quickly with, dust and sediment and whatever. And so it has to get vacuumed out pretty regularly with a big Vector truck. So it's cool, and there are places where it can be used if you have a small flat driveway at your house and you can somehow convince the city to bring the Vector truck over. Thomas?
The other thing about continuing to use parking lots that get flooded is that even if they're available in cars still float downstream and hang up against bridges and stuff, in order to keep them up. The cars are still there because the water flies so fast, it's hard to get them out.
They do. We had quite a few cars in the river, and cars in the river and propane tanks in the river. And be sure to, and dumpsters, be sure to anchor your propane tanks. We got a news reporter called us actually right after the 23 flood and said, we have all these reports of cars floating down the river, and doesn't Friends of the Winooski have a program to intercept those? I was like, I'll get out there with my grappling hook. No.
You might be able to answer this.
Or I might not. We'll see.
There's potential. In Morgantown, in front of the dam, there was a dumpster right in front, like where the sediment has built up. I wondered, were you a part of getting out of there, or how did it just go over? I kept watching it every day. I'm like, how do we just sit here and watch this sit?
There were quite a few dumpsters. So the state was definitely receiving reports of the dumpsters, and they had a person who was kind of in charge of large debris, and it took a long time to get those things out. I think they tried with, it's a dumpster that clearly says Casella across the side. They tried to start there, but it did take a little while to get those large objects out.
There were like 3 in Berlin this year after.
Right here, Hope Farm Way.
Yeah, they were like 20 years.
Could you talk about Farm Home Way just a little bit, how you arrived at how much you have to reduce the level of land there to reconnect?
I would arrive at that by hiring engineers to figure it out. It's not our project, so that one is from Mount River Conservancy and the city of, that one I guess is just the city of Montpelier. And so SLR Consulting from Waterbury is designing that project, and so they are going to do a lot of modeling, hydraulic modeling, to figure out how much material to remove from there and how to recontour it. We did a similar project to that in Northfield after Tropical Storm Irene, a smaller area, only about 4 acres. And SLR also coincidentally did that, or perhaps not so coincidentally, did that design and determined how much material to move and how it should be sloped.
So I guess it's related to the historical flow of the water and seeing what it takes to get to move over.
At what elevation and what slope does the river move over? And the thing is that in a developed context like this, it's tricky because if you invite the water onto the land, you have to help it gracefully go back into its channel. And so you need to make sure that you have
Gracefully.
Yeah, ideally, yeah. So you can't just, say, come on in, river, because it will go where it wants to go. So it takes a lot of math to figure out how to contour that.
How did the results in Northfield compare to the predicted outcome?
Very well. So I don't have the slides to show you right at the moment, but I do have. In the 23 flood, Northfield was not flooded as badly as other communities. It just didn't rain that much at the, atop of the Dog River. And, but the whole neighborhood was inundated. So we have an aerial photo of that area from the 23 flood, and you can see water surrounding all of the homes in the neighborhood. And the engineers who designed the project did a calculation afterward based on actual elevation of the water and found that it was 6 inches lower than it would have been without the project. And 6 inches doesn't sound like much, but the homes in that neighborhood only had basement flooding, and if 6 inches is in your first floor, it's a lot. It makes a big difference. So, so we think it was a real success.
This is a totally different topic. When you talk to homeowners, what sort of things are you looking for, like giving advice about the river? Like what sort of things are you advising on and looking for?
Well, it is super site specific, and that is why we come to your site. And but often, you know, we look for around the home, are there any, you know, clearly erosion issues from the way the water's draining off of the house or the way the driveway is set up. A lot of people have gravel driveways, a lot of people have steep gravel driveways. They're really hard to maintain and have them drain well. So we look at that kind of stuff.
So it's basically about how the river influences the structures on near the bed, as opposed to, like, I'm just thinking, like, how do you know, as a homeowner, when should I approach you and say, we need to develop the river bank? Is it?
Do you have trees on your riverbank for 50 feet back from the top of the bank?
Yes.
Then you're good. But we can come and look at it if you want, because we have a program called Streamwise, where if you do have a good buffer along your river, we can come and assess it and give you an award if it meets the criteria, and give you advice on things like invasive species and enhancement planting and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
You can answer your question better. Is there work that the state is doing about mobile home parks? Many of those are in water areas, and we're probably in like Burke and
Berlin.
Berlin. What the state is doing more around.
Those are local land use issues, so it depends on the zoning in the town how